This morning, the first of more than 1 million COVID-19 vaccine doses earmarked for Texas, they arrive here in 2 weeks. How will those doses be distributed and who will get them first? State Representative Stephanie Klick is a member of the Texas vaccine panel. She's with us. It's a heated special election runoff between Shelley Luther and Drew Springer, and we've got new developments. Plus, Harris County stands by its new election administrator as Texas's Attorney General says she has to go. How's this one going to end? Administrator Isabel Longoria is with us this morning. And Congress is finally holding bipartisan talks to pass a coronavirus stimulus package. If it doesn't happen by the end of the month, unemployment and other benefits will expire for millions of Americans.
Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley starts now.
Good morning, I'm David Schechter in for Jason, and we've got lots planned for you on ITP. But before we sit down with our first guest, let's get you caught up on some political headlines. A Texan is joining the Biden-Harris administration. Ashley Etienne will be the communications director for Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. Etienne is a Texas native who attended Sam Houston State, and before joining the Biden-Harris campaign as a senior advisor, she served as communications director for Speaker Nancy Pelosi and as special assistant to President Barack Obama. Kaufman County will keep its Confederate statue. County commissioners voted this week to keep the Confederate soldier cenotaph at its courthouse. Critics say the statue is a symbol of oppression against blacks. Supporters argue it represents history and heritage. After 14 public hearings about what to do with the statue, the special committee could not reach a conclusion on how to advise the commissioner's court. And by this time next week, we may have an FDA-approved vaccine. If that happens, Texas will get 1.4 million doses this month. Last month, a Gallup poll found only 58% of Americans are willing to be vaccinated. In response, former Presidents Obama, Bush, and Clinton say they will get their shots on camera to show Americans it's safe and effective. If the FDA approves Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine, Texas will get about 1.4 million doses by the end of this year. The first shipment of about 200,000 doses is expected to arrive in a couple of weeks. To oversee the process, Governor Greg Abbott has created something called the COVID-19 Expert Vaccine Allocation Panel. State Representative Stephanie Klick is a member of the panel. She joins us now. Thank you so much for making time for us. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So, who will get the vaccine first and why?
Initially, it will be healthcare workers that have high risk of exposure. You know, we have doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists that are taking care of COVID-19 patients that have a great risk of exposure to the virus. And we want to keep our hospital capacities fully staffed. And so they're the first on the list.
I know you have a long career in healthcare yourself. Would that be, what kind of relief do you think that would deliver to those frontline workers? Also, I think are police and other sort of frontline workers also involved in that number?
Some of your EMS providers, many, since COVID-19 has begun, our EMS providers are doing more in the field. They're doing testing, those sorts of things. So they have a high risk of exposure as well. Transporting patients to the hospital that do have COVID-19.
Things are changing so rapidly. I think you've mentioned hour to hour even. Do you think that 1.4 million, is that an accurate number? Is that the kind of dosage we will see? And does it still seem like it's likely that it will come inside of this month?
Yeah, that information, as I said, is changing. There is a second vaccine that is very close as well that could also begin to be distributed within a few weeks as well.
So that would mean more than the 1.4 million?
Potentially, yes, because that would be from a different manufacturer.
Can you estimate then what the total number would be available by the end of the year?
That I can't at this time. As I said, this is a very fluid situation. We are sometimes having to meet weekly to adjust to new information from the feds.
Can you talk about the complexity of delivering all those shots? How does that actually happen?
Particularly with the Pfizer vaccine, which has to be stored ultra cold below 90 degrees below to maintain it, which means that there are only certain number of facilities, even within the state, that have the capacity to store it. Other locations are going to have to use dry ice. Once the vaccine is thawed and reconstituted, it has to be used within 5 days. So there's a lot of logistical issues in distributing that.
Can you talk about other populations, vulnerable populations in particular? I'd like to talk about kids if we have a chance after that, but the elderly in communal living situations, will they be next?
They are also, part of that first group of individuals. If you look at the fatalities that we've occurred, a lot of them have been in long-term care senior citizens. They're a very vulnerable population. So they too need to be immunized to prevent COVID-19.
So in a practical sense, you have parents. These are people's parents and grandparents.
Correct.
How do we, the public, find out that, hey, grandma is in line for this vaccine?
If grandma is in a facility, the facility that she is in, will be communicating with the families of their residents, letting them know.
So we heard from a superintendent this week, and I guess several large school districts saying teachers should be included, considered these frontline workers, but they at the moment are not, correct?
They are considered essential workers, but the first, we learn how many doses we're getting each week, and we allocate those based on the epidemiology, the science, and those at most risk from encountering and being exposed to COVID-19.
If you had to guess, when do you think Texas will be an immunized state?
I think that late spring, early summer, we'll be in very good shape. And this is unprecedented to have vaccines, not just one, but multiple ones, into the supply chain, so that we can immunize folks from a disease that can be fatal.
Representative Stephanie Klick, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Time is running out for Congress to pass a new COVID relief bill before some benefits expire at the end of the month. The uncertainty leaves tens of millions of Americans wondering how they'll make ends meet without government aid. Democratic House and Senate leaders are supporting a $900 billion bipartisan COVID-19 relief plan. So far, Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell is backing his own much smaller plan. This is an example of just how much decisions in Washington can affect everyday lives. And Abby Livingston is in for Ross Ramsey this morning. She's the Washington bureau chief for the Texas Tribune. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Can you give us a quick update on how the negotiations are going?
Absolutely. The COVID relief package negotiations have taken on a new urgency for two reasons. One, earlier this week, moderates in the House chamber and in the Senate chamber have reared their heads and have pushed for a compromise. The second thing is just the sheer scale of the pandemic and how it's hitting every state in the union, and how the urgency of this previous efforts of the COVID relief have begun to run out. And we may see whether or not there are lockdowns, a downturn in economic activity, because Americans just don't want to go and engage in stores and restaurants because they're frankly scared.
Let's move to some Texas leaders who are ignoring doctors' orders. Austin Mayor told everybody to stay home, but then he went on vacation in Mexico, and Tarrant County judge had his extended family over for Thanksgiving. What are the political ramifications of leaders who are sort of not following their own orders?
Well, one, Texans and Americans see hypocrisy right in front of them. It's one of the easiest things to spot. The second thing is, I think this is incredibly demoralizing to people who are tired, who have sat out, who've missed their family on Thanksgiving. And a lot of these politicians like to compare themselves to folks like Winston Churchill. And Churchill was there with the Londoners and the Blitz. And so it's just, I think this is the last thing Americans need to see, is their leaders not following through with their actions.
Abby, thank you so much. We'll see you again in a few minutes here. But coming up next, the Texas Attorney General wants Harris County's new election administrator removed. The commissioners are backing up Isabel Longoria, and we're talking to her next. Also, a new development in the heated state Senate runoff election, where early voting starts next week. You're watching Inside Texas Politics. Okay, let's go to Harris County, where county commissioners are supporting their newly appointed election administrator. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton says the position was created illegally because the Secretary of State was not properly notified of the appointment. With us this morning is Isabel Longoria. She is the election administrator. Good morning. Thanks for being with us.
Hey, howdy. Thanks for having me.
So are you the election administrator or not?
I am. I'm actually at NRG now. It's business as usual for us. Appreciated Ken Paxton really holding us accountable, but we crossed all our T's, we dotted all our I's. Everything's good to go here in Harris County.
So I think he's pointing at like sort of just maybe a small administrative issue of when the Secretary of State was notified that your position had been created. So was that significant in your view that there may have been some sort of small procedural oversight?
Clerical issues. You know, it's interesting in the modern world. We've tweeted it out. We've shared it on Facebook. I was talking to the Secretary of State almost daily and continue to. So I understand, you know, these laws were created back in the day when we didn't have things like social media to notify folks of what was going on. It's all been above board. The Commissioner's Court has voted on it multiple times. So I get it. You know, we got to make sure we turn our paperwork in on time. But, you know, we talked with our attorneys and it's just that we'll be better about turning our paperwork in. But we turned it in. It's all good. And I'm here to keep working. I
know that the Attorney General has been looking for election fraud and has sent out press releases about things that he has seen around the state. Do you believe this is an effort to discredit in any way the election results out of Harris County?
No, like you said, you know, we just came off of a major presidential election. Harris County reported 1.65 million voters. I think just tensions were high, making sure that nothing was done improperly. So again, I appreciate the accountability, but we're here in the December runoff elections. We're barely tapping out 150 voters per day. So I think now that we're coming off the presidential and getting back into our normal routine, everyone, you know, we're just business as usual, like I said.
Can you talk about the job of election administrator? I know it's a big, you know, a lot of big counties have it. Most big counties do have it, and you guys were a little late to getting there. Why is it important to have that position?
It's important for two reasons. One, as most voters already expect, we are taking the voter registration functions from the tax office, which comes back from the days of poll taxes, right? And the elections functions from the county clerk office, which usually is dealing with recording major events in a county and combining them. So for a major county, you have voter registration and voting and everything in between coming out of one office now. And also to keep it a nonpartisan position. I think in the past, you know, what we've seen is when it's elected officials running this, they're beholden to a lot of partisan influences. So I'm ecstatic that now we have a nonpartisan official and myself to just keep voting about voting.
So we have 10 seconds here. This is a done deal?
Done deal. I'm good to go, unless I hear otherwise. So like I said, we're just hosting the December runoff elections, hoping people across Texas are voting in your runoffs, and we'll keep going. All
right, well, we'll wait to see how the Attorney General responds to that, but we appreciate your time and thank you for joining us, and good luck with your runoff elections.
Thanks so much, Dave.
This week, Governor Greg Abbott jumped into the hotly contested race for Texas Senate District 30. He endorsed State Representative Drew Springer over salon owner Shelley Luther. State Senate District 30 covers 14 counties. It stretches across the top of DFW from McKinney to Sherman, over to Wichita Falls, and down to Stephenville. Matt Makoviak is here to talk about the runoff. He's the Travis County, Republican Party chairman. Thanks for being with us today, Matt. Good to see you.
Hey, good to see you.
Can you remind us again, if anyone has forgotten, what makes Shelley Luther such a potent candidate?
Well, so she is I guess what it was, a salon owner there in the DFW area whose business was shut down, and I think she refused to comply. This was, I want to say, back in April or May timeframe. And I believe she even went to jail for a day or day and a half until ultimately it became clear that that level of punishment was not something that the state thought was appropriate. So she's kind of rode that issue to some level of grassroots support locally and to a pretty strong finish in the first round in the special election. So she's now in a runoff with State Representative Drew Springer, who the governor's now endorsed. Yeah. And it goes to, what is it, December 19th, I want to say? Is that the date of the runoff?
But she has made no secret of not liking the governor's anything he's done on COVID restrictions. So I suspect that plays into Governor Abbott citing and endorsing Springer here.
Yeah, I think it does. I think it's more than that, though. I think the governor has confidence in Representative Springer. He's known him a long time, worked with him on legislation, believes he's a great leader for our state and for that region. He probably, it's possible he's never met Shelley Luther. You know, what's interesting about her is she really has almost no involvement in the Republican Party that anyone can find. She's never voted in a Republican primary before this year. I'm not aware of her ever volunteering for a campaign, a local Republican campaign. While, of course, Springer's been a leader in the legislature and has a great reputation. So, yes, I think part of this is the governor wants to have someone in the Senate that he can work with, that he has confidence in. But also, when you have a Republican candidate running for Texas Senate who's attacking him left and right, makes it the decision easier.
Her candidacy, I guess I'd say sort of Trumpian in a way. She's sort of a candidate that definitely aligns with the president and a political outsider as well. How is that kind of politics coming into play in Texas state politics? You would thought maybe more so than what we saw, but she definitely represents that.
Well, if by that you mean an outsider who's new to politics, who's kind of running against the establishment, I think there's probably some truth to that. Look, a lot of people, I think, over the last 4 years looked at Trump's success in 2016 and thought, if he can do it, I can do it. And there are actually very few examples of people who did kind of anything close to what Trump did on the local level or statewide level in any state around the country. There are a lot of people who've tried. They've used his issues. They've used his approach. They've used his outsider status, his anti-establishment credentials, his anti-media message, you name it, varying levels of success. I think the question about this runoff is going to be, can she convince enough Republican primary voters to turn out in the special election to effectively try to punish the governor for the difficult decisions he's made related to COVID?
You think she's got any? Do you think she had a lot of fuel in the tank early, and we got 30 seconds? Do you think she's got enough to finish that job?
Yeah, so runoffs are hard to predict, right? The turnout's very low. It depends a lot on who you get to turn out. I do think the governor getting involved, endorsing, using his organization to really put his shoulder to the wheel to help Representative Springer. This is going to be really close. I think Springer's probably narrowly more likely to win than not. But it comes down to enthusiasm and turnout. And being that you're talking about mid to late December, it's a really tough time for people to vote.
Matt, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Sure.
See you next time. And the question is, will there be a Texan in President-elect Biden's cabinet? We'll talk about that coming up next in our Reporters Roundtable.
This is Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley.
It's time now for the Reporters Roundtable to put the headlines in perspective. Abby is back, and joining us each week, of course, is Bud Kennedy from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram and Bernadine Steptoe, the political producer here at WFA. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to start with you, Abby. Any Texans on the Biden cabinet list? How's that looking?
It's not looking great at the high-level positions right now, and there's one reason for that. House Democrats took losses, and some of the most prominent Texans in the Democratic world in Texas are U.S. House members, and Speaker Pelosi does not have the margins to lose anybody in her caucus, even if it's just for a brief window during a special election replacement period.
What do you think about that, Bud?
Well, you know, there were going to be some Texans. I think people like Mayor Adler ruled himself out, although he could have been a candidate. Abby's right. The congressman, the Mark Veseys, need to stay there and keep working for Texas. Democrats don't have a very deep bench, and that catches up to them every time.
It's not just about Congress people, I would imagine, though, Bernadine, is it? I mean, there are a lot of Democrats in Texas.
I know, but what does Texas bring to the table now? Because Texas is still a red state. So if you bring somebody out of here or out of the state, what kind of benefits does it give Biden? So I think at this point, we're not going to see any Texans at any high level.
But on that same issue, Beto O'Rourke is somebody that everybody knows, many people know outside of Texas, would be a high profile name. What do you think? What is his future here in the state?
Well, at one point we thought that Beto or Castro, might be a cabinet member, but I think, neither one of them is in the picture at this time. As far as Beto's future, he's still rebuilding. He's still Beto. He's still a little bit of a maverick. He's trying to work into help rebuild the Democratic Party. And after the downfall they had in the Valley, they lost some counties they usually win.
Think he'll run for governor?
I think that I don't think so. I think that this is not going to be a favorable year, and he won't run if he can't win.
What do you think about that, Abby?
I think Congressman O'Rourke did hurt himself within the state with his comments on AR-14s during the debates in 2019. So I think the gubernatorial race will be the first indication. Do Democrats line up? And that'll show us which way the wind is blowing. But I'm not hearing many names at this point.
Let's go over to Bernadine. Let's talk about some of the reluctance in Texas by our elected officials to call President-elect Biden the president-elect. What's the politics behind that?
I think the politics is definitely that why would they? You know what? Texas is coping with the COVID-19 issues. And why would Texans, Republicans, call out and get into the fight that's going on now with their president? And as you know, President Trump has the way of attacking anyone who attacks him. So, and he sees that recognizing President-elect Biden as president is an attack on him. So why would Texas Republicans get into that fight?
What do you think?
There's no win.
But is there any gain there for anyone?
Well, you know, what's going on is that grassroots Republicans want people who fight. They want leaders who fight. So Republicans may know that they've lost this election, that they still have to show voters that they'll fight. That's what the big rallies like the one in Dallas Saturday all about, is who will fight and argue and stick up their dukes and try to fight on behalf of the party, whether or not they've already lost.
Got to cut you off there. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate the roundtable. Thanks for joining us on Inside Texas Politics. We'll be back next week. Stay healthy. Have a good week.